Mahatma Gandhi. Struggle for Indian independence 1915 to 1947. At the request of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, conveyed to him by C.F. Andrews, Gandhi returned to India in 1915. He brought an international reputation as a leading Indian nationalist, theorist and community organizer. Gandhi joined the Indian National Congress and was introduced to Indian issues, politics and the Indian people primarily by Gokhale. Gokhale was a key leader of the Congress party, best known for his restraint and moderation, and his insistence on working inside the system. Gandhi took Gokhale's liberal approach based on British Whiggish traditions and transformed it to make it look Indian. Gandhi took leadership of the Congress in 1920 and began escalating demands until on the 26th of January 1930 the Indian National Congress declared the independence of India. The British did not recognize the declaration, but negotiations ensued, with the Congress taking a role in provincial government in the late 1930s. Gandhi and the Congress withdrew their support of the Raj when the Viceroy declared war on Germany in September 1939 without consultation. Tensions escalated until Gandhi demanded immediate independence in 1942 and the British responded by imprisoning him and tens of thousands of Congress leaders. Meanwhile, the Muslim League did cooperate with Britain and moved, against Gandhi's strong opposition, to demands for a totally separate Muslim state of Pakistan. In August 1947 the British partitioned the land with India and Pakistan each achieving independence on terms that Gandhi disapproved. Role in World War I. In April 1918, during the latter part of World War I, the Viceroy invited Gandhi to a war conference in Delhi. Gandhi agreed to actively recruit Indians for the war effort. In contrast to the Zulu War of 1906 and the outbreak of World War I in 1914, when he recruited volunteers for the ambulance corps, this time Gandhi attempted to recruit combatants. In a June 1918 leaflet entitled Appeal for Enlistment, Gandhi wrote, "To bring about such a state of things we should have the ability to defend ourselves, that is, the ability to bear arms and to use them. If we want to learn the use of arms with the greatest possible dispatch, it is our duty to enlist ourselves in the army." He did, however, stipulate in a letter to the Viceroy's private secretary that he personally will not kill or injure anybody, friend or foe. Gandhi's war recruitment campaign brought into question his consistency on nonviolence. Gandhi's private secretary noted that the question of the consistency between his creed of ahimsa and his recruiting campaign was raised not only then but has been discussed ever since. Champaran agitations. Gandhi's first major achievement came in 1917 with the Champaran agitation in Bihar. The Champaran agitation pitted the local peasantry against their largely British landlords who were backed by the local administration. The peasantry was forced to grow indigofera, a cash crop for indigo dye whose demand had been declining over 2 decades, and were forced to sell their crops to the planters at a fixed price. Unhappy with this, the peasantry appealed to Gandhi at his ashram in Ahmedabad. Pursuing a strategy of nonviolent protest, Gandhi took the administration by surprise and won concessions from the authorities. Kheda agitations. In 1918, Kheda was hit by floods and famine and the peasantry was demanding relief from taxes. Gandhi moved his headquarters to Nadiad, organizing scores of supporters and fresh volunteers from the region, the most notable being Vallabhbhai Patel. Using non-cooperation as a technique, Gandhi initiated a signature campaign where peasants pledged non-payment of revenue even under the threat of confiscation of land. A social boycott of Mamladars and Taladdars accompanied the agitation. Gandhi worked hard to win public support for the agitation across the country. For 5 months, the administration refused, but finally in end May 1918, the government gave way on important provisions and relaxed the conditions of payment of revenue tax until the famine ended. In Kheda, Vallabhbhai Patel represented the farmers in negotiations with the British, who suspended revenue collection and released all the prisoners. Khilafat movement. Every revolution begins with a single act of defiance. In 1919, following World War I, Gandhi sought political cooperation from Muslims in his fight against British imperialism by supporting the Ottoman Empire that had been defeated in the World War. Before this initiative of Gandhi, communal disputes and religious riots between Hindus and Muslims were common in British India, such as the riots of 1917-18. Gandhi had already supported the British Crown with resources and by recruiting Indian soldiers to fight the war in Europe on the British side. This effort of Gandhi was in part motivated by the British promise to reciprocate the help with Swaraj to Indians after the end of World War I. The British government, instead of self-government, had offered minor reforms instead, disappointing Gandhi. Gandhi announced his satyagraha intentions. The British colonial officials made their counter-move by passing the Rowlatt Act to block Gandhi's movement. The act allowed the British government to treat civil disobedience participants as criminals and gave it the legal basis to arrest anyone for preventive indefinite detention, incarceration without judicial review or any need for a trial. Gandhi felt that Hindu-Muslim cooperation was necessary for political progress against the British. He leveraged the Khilafat movement, wherein Sunni Muslims in India, their leaders such as the sultans of princely states in India and Ali brothers championed the Turkish Caliph as a solidarity symbol of Sunni Islamic community. They saw the Caliph as their means to support Islam and the Islamic law. After the defeat of Ottoman Empire in World War I, Gandhi's support to the Khilafat movement led to mixed results. It initially led to a strong Muslim support for Gandhi. However, the Hindu leaders including Rabindranath Tagore questioned Gandhi's leadership because they were largely against recognizing or supporting the Sunni Islamic Caliph in Turkey. The increasing Muslim support for Gandhi after he championed the Caliph's cause temporarily stopped the Hindu-Muslim communal violence. It offered evidence of inter-communal harmony in joint Rolat Satyagraha demonstration rallies, raising Gandhi's stature as the political leader to the British. His support for the Khilafat movement also helped him sideline Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who had announced his opposition to the Satyagraha non-cooperation movement approach of Gandhi. Jinnah began creating his independent support and later went on to lead the demand for West and East Pakistan. Though they agreed in general terms on Indian independence, they disagreed on the means of achieving this. Jinnah was mainly interested in dealing with the British via constitutional negotiation rather than attempting to agitate the masses. By the end of 1922, the Khilafat movement had collapsed. Turkey's Ataturk had ended the caliphate, Khilafat movement ended, and Muslim support for Gandhi largely evaporated. Muslim leaders and delegates abandoned Gandhi and his Congress. Hindu-Muslim communal conflicts reignited. Deadly religious riots reappeared in numerous cities, with 91 in United Provinces of Agra and Oudh alone. Non-cooperation. With his book Hind Swaraj, Gandhi, aged 40, declared that British rule was established in India with the cooperation of Indians and had survived only because of this cooperation. If Indians refused to cooperate, British rule would collapse and Swaraj would come. In February 1919, Gandhi cautioned the Viceroy of India with a cable communication that if the British were to pass the Rolat Act, he would appeal to Indians to start civil disobedience. The British government ignored him and passed the law, stating it would not yield to threats. The Satyagraha civil disobedience followed, with people assembling to protest the Rolat Act. On the 30th of March 1919, British law officers opened fire on an assembly of unarmed people, peacefully gathered, participating in Satyagraha in Delhi. People rioted in retaliation. On the 6th of April 1919, a Hindu festival day, he asked a crowd to remember not to injure or kill British people, but to express their frustration with peace, to boycott British goods and burn any British clothing they owned. He emphasized the use of non-violence to the British and towards each other, even if the other side uses violence. Communities across India announced plans to gather in greater numbers to protest. Government warned him to not enter Delhi. Gandhi defied the order. On the 9th of April, Gandhi was arrested. People rioted. On the 13th of April 1919, people including women with children gathered in an Amritsar park, and a British officer named Reginald Dyer surrounded them and ordered his troops to fire on them. The resulting Jallianwala Bagh massacre of hundreds of Sikh and Hindu civilians enraged the subcontinent, but was cheered by some Britons and parts of the British media as an appropriate response. Gandhi in Ahmedabad, on the day after the massacre in Amritsar, did not criticize the British and instead criticized his fellow countrymen for not exclusively using love to deal with the hate of the British government. Gandhi demanded that people stop all violence, stop all property destruction, and went on fast to death to pressure Indians to stop their rioting. The massacre and Gandhi's non-violent response to it moved many, but also made some Sikhs and Hindus upset that Dyer was getting away with murder. Investigation committees were formed by the British, which Gandhi asked Indians to boycott. The unfolding events, the massacre and the British response, led Gandhi to the belief that Indians will never get a fair equal treatment under British rulers, and he shifted his attention to Swaraj or self-rule and political independence for India. In 1921, Gandhi was the leader of the Indian National Congress. He reorganized the Congress. With Congress now behind him, and Muslim support triggered by his backing the Khilafat movement to restore the Caliph in Turkey, Gandhi had the political support and the attention of the British Raj. Gandhi expanded his non-violent non-cooperation platform to include the Swadeshi policy, the boycott of foreign-made goods, especially British goods. Linked to this was his advocacy that khadi be worn by all Indians instead of British-made textiles. Gandhi exhorted Indian men and women, rich or poor, to spend time each day spinning khadi in support of the independence movement. In addition to boycotting British products, Gandhi urged the people to boycott British institutions and law courts, to resign from government employment, and to forsake British titles and honours. Gandhi thus began his journey aimed at crippling the British India government economically, politically and administratively. The appeal of non-cooperation grew, its social popularity drew participation from all strata of Indian society. Gandhi was arrested on the 10th of March 1922, tried for sedition, and sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. He began his sentence on the 18th of March 1922. With Gandhi isolated in prison, the Indian National Congress split into two factions, one led by Chitta Ranjan Das and Motilal Nehru favouring party participation in the legislatures, and the other led by Chakravarti Rajagopalachari and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, opposing this move. Furthermore, cooperation among Hindus and Muslims ended as Khilafat movement collapsed with the rise of Ataturk in Turkey. Muslim leaders left the Congress and began forming Muslim organizations. The political base behind Gandhi had broken into factions. Gandhi was released in February 1924 for an appendicitis operation, having served only 2 years.